Hey guys, welcome to Permaculture Perspectives. Today I wanted to talk about something that I've come across a lot. That's a really major misconception in the world of permaculture. And that's the idea that if you don't own land or have access to a big piece of land that you can't do permaculture, which in my opinion is completely false. You can't imagine how many times I've been at a permaculture event or just talking to people about permaculture, and I've heard so many times, oh my God, permaculture seems like such an amazing idea and it's really interesting. I'd love to do it, but I live in an apartment, so I can't. Or I don't own land, so I can't. And I think that that misconception comes about from the sort of popular permaculture demonstration projects or, documentaries and movies that show these big, expansive land designs. So I'll give the example of me. I've never owned land personally, and I don't have enough money with my partner to buy a piece of land right now. However, we host a group called Permaculture Kelowna, and we still do permaculture to the extent that we can. And there isn't really like a scale of, if you have access to this many resources, you can do like bad permaculture, but if you have access to lots of resources, you can do great permaculture. Like you can make an amazing design inside of a tiny apartment, because what permaculture is focusing on the design element or the connections between parts of a system rather than how big a system is or how flashy a system is. To give you another example, I recently interviewed someone at my work, a summer student who was really interested in gardening, except he lives in a 200 square one-room apartment with his partner. And they were able to set up this whole indoor herb growing system just based on designing it really well. So if all you have access to is a few planter pots and a windowsill, you can still do permaculture, especially if you take into account all your different sectors, like your sunlight, your changes in temperature, your shade, all these different factors that are present in any context. If you can design creatively and with critical thinking and really understanding the design principles of what permaculture is, then any limitations that you have in terms of resources, money, land access are just borders. They're just the borders of your design. So if you can work within those borders, then you can create a really amazing design. And it was Bill Mollison, one of the founders of permaculture, that said that the only limits to our designs are the designer's own creativity, not how big your land is, not how much money you have. So I really wanted to talk about that because I think it's something that holds a lot of people back. And it's just because they don't have a real grasp of what permaculture actually is. You can use permaculture design applications to design your the way that you spend money, to design an organization, a business, or your household. And that's really the way that my partner and I have sort of approached permaculture. It's just a way of thinking and acting in our context. Permaculture isn't necessarily something that has to look a certain way. It's really the way you approach your design. And so don't be afraid if what you do doesn't look ideal, because it's not really about that. It's about being creative and becoming a designer. Every time you think through the permaculture lens, you get better and better. So I just wanted to show you guys one way that we access community resources, even though we don't have direct access to them on the piece of property where we live. So we really wanted to make our own fertilizer for growing our vegetables this summer, and a really great way to do that is to use comfrey leaves and to ferment them for a few weeks, and then to use the resulting liquid diluted with water as a compost tea on your garden, because comfrey is super nutrient rich because it has a deep taproot and it pulls up nutrients down from the soil below into its leaves. We do not have any comfrey growing on the property, and we really wanted to get some. And it just so happens that there is a public access food forest in Kelowna, which has tons of comfrey growing, and the public is allowed to harvest it for free. So we just went down to the local food forest and picked some of the comfrey leaves and brought them home. And so what I'm doing here is just putting them in a bucket and filling up the bucket with water until it covers the comfrey leaves by just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave that to ferment for a few weeks and stir it occasionally. And once it's pretty smelly and the leaves have broken down, I'm going to use it in a watering can. I think you dilute it 5-to-1 with water, and then you can pour it at the base of your veggies. And so I would really encourage you guys, even if you don't have access to land or if you don't have a huge diversity of plants in your backyard, see what else is out there in your community. Comfrey, for example, is a really common plant. It sometimes just grows like a weed wild. You might find it in parks or in other public spaces, and it's just a resource waiting to be harvested, similar to things like sorrel and yarrow and plantain. So there's really a huge diversity of resources that are available to people who do a bit of research and, look for them. A lot of people just aren't used to having things be publicly available, and I think there's way more available than we think there is. So I just wanted to share that with you guys and show you a little bit about how we make compost tea for our garden. Feel free to subscribe to this channel and like this video if you liked it. Feel free to comment below. I would love to connect with you guys, and I'll see you next time on Permaculture Perspectives. Take care.